You're right to go, Rebecca?
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Welcome to today's meeting, 29th of March 2022. I'll just make a note that this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for acknowledgement of country and our open prayer. I acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting from the lands of the Wangaratta people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meeting. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands of Wangaratta and Victoria. Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council and its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people who we serve. Amen. I'll quickly go down the agenda and disclose. I will put a motion forward shortly to bring a couple of items forward because it's a reasonably long meeting and could drag on, to allow people, if they want to go home during or after their specific item that they're interested in, can go and get home before it gets dark. I'll go down to point number 8 is conflict of interest disclosure. I'd just like to state that on item 16.4, I will be declaring a conflict of interest and will be leaving the hall, and Councillor Bustle, as my deputy, will be taking over for that one item. The conflict that I have is that I own property within that estate and feel that it could be a conflict either way in relation to the resolution of that item. I will continue down to presentation of reports. I'll hand over to Councillor Bustle, Deputy Bustle. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I always miss that. Sorry, thank you, Councillor Fuller. The confirmation of our previous minutes. Can I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Herry.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to draw attention to the fact that the minutes which describe the question time,
Yes.
and Mr. Maroney, and his name has been spelled incorrectly. So that needs to be, we've actually changed his nationality in the spelling.
Rightio. We'll change his from David Maroney to David Maroney, but the correct spelling.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grant will make note of that and have that amended. As you raised the question at public question time last council meeting. So confirmation was moved by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Herry. If there's no other change apart from that one, are we all in favour? And the motion is carried. Again, I'll move down now to item 11, council reports. Councillor Bustle does have a report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is to do with the drought cause, where the council got a grant of $545,000 after the drought and bushfires. I said at the time this was a very, very important project, and it's 10 bores. So we commenced to drill these bores, and there was one just right here beside where we're meeting here tonight. Bore number 1 was Hughes Road, Springhurst. That was abandoned. No indicators of water. Bore 2, Plugs, Campbell's Road, Springhurst. Bore drilled and capped, earthworks being completed next week. The next 2 weeks, solar tanks, pipe work, standpipe, slab and shed will be installed and pumped. New larger pump, solar and sub is on its way and had to upgrade the pump due to depth. Bore number 3, existing Greater West, tank installed and plumbed, currently operational, will install pipe work for GMW meeting next week. Bore number 4 was Wangaratta, that got suspended. Bore number 5, existing Lamungi, tanks installed and plumbed, currently operational, will install pipe work for the GMW meter next week. Installed and interested. Bore number 6 is where we are here in Carbore. Bore complete, pump installed, solar installed, tanks and plumbed. And these bores will be used for council roadworks, for the CFA, and for anybody who runs their water in a drought, which I said at the time was really, really important. When we've existed here for a long time, we just don't have water security. Bore number 7 was the Killawarra, was abandoned because of no water. Bore number 8, Ego Upper, bore was complete, pump installed. Bore number 9 is Laceby, bore complete, that's what's been completed. Bore number 10 was Cheshunt. And that's about it for that. All works will be completed by the 30th of April, which is only a month away. And to have something as important as water, and for many places we just don't have water security. So I think this is an amazing project that the council has delivered here. And I thank Marcus and his team of contractors that have worked to do this, because it will change people's lives to know that they have water, where they can come and get water and they don't have to pay for it. It's just a magnificent project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fuller.
I move that Councillor Buswell's report be omitted in the actual agenda minutes. Thank you.
Second. Councillor Fitzpatrick. Are we all in favour of that minuted? The recommendation, thank you, is carried. Councillor Fuller. Thank you. So I'll move on to, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to move Development Services items 16.3 and 16.4 forward to this part of the meeting. 16.3 being forward. So I'd like to recommend that we change standing orders to move these items 16.3 and 16.4. So I'm the mover of that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Russell. Would any councillor like to talk on the recommendation? No, I'll put the recommendation forward. All those in favour to move those items forward? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. So, Director Swart, I'll now lean towards you for item 16.3, which is the planning application, PIN number 20/063, 145 Mamungi Road, Mamungi, using the development of the land for urban energy resources industry processing of ore and green gold.
Thank you. As you said, there's items about a planning permit application to process ore to extract gold at 145 Mamungi Road, Mamungi. The subject land is in the farming zone, and under the Wangaratta planning scheme, the use and development applied for can be considered in this zone. Ore is proposed to be extracted at another site, so not the subject land, a few kilometres away, and then brought to 145 Mamungi Road for processing. The application has been referred to relevant referral authorities with no objections, subject to conditions. Notice of the application was also given, and as a result of that, a number of objections were received. So at the time of writing of this report, 17 objections were received. The application, submissions and referral responses have been considered against the provisions of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme and the Planning Environment Act, and officers recommend that Council issues a notice of decision to grant a permit subject to the conditions contained in Attachment 1.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the gallery? Please come forward to the microphone and state your name and please ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Paul Ferguson. The questions I have are, the first one is having regard to the fact that the processing plant is in an area which is zone farming, opposite a nature reserve and in close proximity to Gorgie Creek. How does the council reconcile the operation of a commercial industrial gold ore processing plant in a sensitive area zoned and used for farming? Because we feel that the planning recommendation that's been provided doesn't properly reconcile those concerns. We appreciate that there's a great deal of conditions which we feel aren't properly fleshed out, but the report and the recommendation does not reconcile that operation in that zone. Appreciate it is not precluded, but as an appropriate activity in that area, we just don't feel that it's properly reconciled. The second question I have is, has the council considered other more appropriate solutions to where this ore processing plant might be? Other ones that have been raised at the planning department are a quarry, which is very local. It could be done on site, which would be expected, or it could be done in an industrial area within very close proximity in Beechworth or Denman Gapstead or somewhere where it's not farming in the bottom of a basin with all these sensitive areas. So that was the second question. One final thing I have to say is some of the residents in the local area were not given notification of this. Some of them were. I think there was a 2 kilometre radius. I've been contacted by various people, one of which even tonight was Dennis Hayward. He owns large areas of farmland, including 450 acres not far from where the processing plant's going to be. He was never contacted, and his property has the Bagorji Creek going through it, which represents a risk as far as he's concerned. A comment is that I don't think the consultation was satisfactory. I thank the council for hearing our concerns.
Thank you, Paul, for your question. Director Sport, would you have a reply to that?
Yes, thank you for those questions. In terms of your first question, in terms of reconciling the purpose of the farming zone, sensitive environment in terms of waterways, there's a bit of reserve to the north of the site as well. One of the things that the farming zone allows us to do is to consider other uses, not just farming. So you would know that the farming zone contains a range of uses that can be considered in the farming zone. When we consider those things that are not farming, we have to turn our minds to what would the impact of that specific activity be on farming, and will that be a negative impact to the extent that the application shouldn't be supported. In this case, we turned our minds to that question, and that's all detailed in the officer's assessment. We considered that only a small parcel of the land is going to be taken out of farming production. It's only 1,600 square meters. And if you then start to consider, okay, what are the impacts on surrounding properties, you start thinking about potential offsite impacts like dust and noise and others as well. One of the things that spring to mind is that the scale of the operation is minor in nature, and that is also regulated through some of the proposed conditions on the proposed permit. And the other main issue that came up was potential impacts on waterways. When it comes to impacts on waterways, we depend on our referral authorities to give us advice, and no objections were raised by the referral authorities, subject to conditions being added to any permit that's issued, and we have done that. So on balance, we have to consider all of these things, and the officer's recommendation is that this is a suitable proposal for that area. The second question is, have you considered any other locations or other solutions in terms of where this type of operation could happen? The reality is that council has an obligation to process applications that come to us. In this case, the application was to do this activity on this piece of land, and the planning provisions allow us to consider that. When the planning provisions allow us to consider that, it also tells us that we have to consider all of these other factors that I just described. All of those have been considered, and they are detailed in the officer's assessment that's attached to the report tonight. In terms of notification, I know that wasn't the question, but I think I'll respond to that in any case. Council has an obligation to notify landowners, and a lot of the time, we make a determination as to how wide that notice is going to go. In this case, I would argue that we actually went wider than we would normally go. And in fact, in this case, we've also provided notice on 2 occasions because there were some changes to the application. So, I think that is something that could be questioned, but I am confident that we are complying with the Planning Environment Act when it comes to notice requirements.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery on this issue? Yes, please. Could you please step forward and just say your name?
Susan Ryan, I live directly opposite the alleged plant, which has been existing for over 12 months now and been operational, and I've heard it, and you can think what you like about that, but I know what I've heard, and I'm very friendly with the people that are operating the plant or the land which it owns, and I resent really being put in this situation where I don't believe that adequate environmental studies or impact studies have been done. I'd also like to know where this assessor report is. I've not received one. Have we received one?
What report, sorry?
The report you're referring to, that your assessor's report on the environmental studies, etc. I believe that I spent hours writing a letter to council, and I should be given that information to read before this meeting. You're obviously privy to it, you're referring to it, and I don't have that information. So how can we best respond if we're not privy to the information? Also, if you look at the plant, the actual plan, and unfortunately my notes are in the car because I've gone straight to work, but there was excessive water use, and even though it was alleged to be recycled, the end tailings have to use fresh water, and that creek goes through my property, as does the reserve, and I'm just totally opposed to it, as many of my neighbours are. It should not be there, it should be somewhere else in the industrial estate. And I will fight tooth and nail and go to court over this because I feel very passionate about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Stephen, any response about the report or the assessment done by our guys that was
Yeah, absolutely.
available?
So the assessment that I'm referring to is the officer's assessment that's attached to the agenda for this meeting. So that agenda was released publicly on Friday and made available to everybody in the community. The attachments to the report include proposed permit conditions, the assessment that I'm referring to, and also the plans that you would be familiar with and you would have seen before. In terms of your comments about excessive water use and the impacts on the creek, the proposal, as I understand it, allows for water to be reused, and there's also a series of bunting and dams that will capture runoff from the site. Most of those things are requirements that were put in place by referral authorities. So I said before that we depend on referral authorities such as Golden Murray Water and also the North East Catchment Management Authority to assess the impacts of the application, and we take their feedback on board. And a lot of the time we are obligated to take that feedback on board, especially if they are saying you should put these conditions on any permit that you should put those conditions on.
I'm sorry, but if you want to achieve this successful application, you need to provide the people opposing the application the information that you have been privy to.
All of the information that was submitted as part of the application has been provided to those people involved. To make a submission against this application, we would have had access to all of the information that we have.
Oh, but I had access, but I wasn't told where to go to find it. I had to have been on council to know how to do that. You know, it's about transparency here, and I believe council has shown a distinct lack of transparency for the opposers. And I'd also like to say that how can you trust somebody and their environmental studies when they say, and as for salinity, we don't use salt water in our process. And that is the answer to the issue raised about salinity. That is the applicant's answer to a salinity problem. We do not use salt in the water we are using for the process. We also said, the applicant also said, we may put plastic liners on the dams if we have to. It gives you no confidence in the fact that these people are going to actually be proactive in looking after the environment. It's appalling. And you think it's okay. Well, I'm sorry, it's not okay.
Appreciate a lot of what is outlined in the report as the council officer's perspective of this one. And I do appreciate it because it's a small operation as it is currently proposed, and it does take up a relatively small patch of quite good agricultural land at 1,600 square metres. Nonetheless, I do have some concerns, but I guess that is one aspect. It definitely isn't only how much land is consumed by a different use in a farming zone or agricultural area. It's largely around use that comes out of whatever those activities are. And there definitely could be and is potential exists for outcomes from this. Obviously, you've got noise, you have various impacts on environmental aspects of the surrounding farmland as well as potential. And some of those we just don't know before. I'm being instructed. Ready to go. And some of those we just don't have a full, deep understanding of. So I have some reservations on those grounds. Another area I've got some concerns is with respect to how much it can process. I know it has been put forth in the report that it will be limited by the truck, not by the truck movements, by the hours of operation and also by the number of personnel on site. However, I would like to see some actual quantitative kind of restrictions upon processing amount. I do appreciate they will be limitations, however, I don't think we can absolutely put our finger on just how much processing will go on, given those variables. And of course, I mean, a lot of the discussion from the floor and the questions that's been on the environmental aspect, I personally would like to see a bit more of an in-depth environmental impact assessment before writing off on this one. I think there are a lot of unknowns, and our council officers have done their best due diligence within their planning department skills to assess those environmental risks, but I guess without a more thorough impact assessment and then responding to that, there are just a number of unknowns that I'm not quite comfortable with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Any other councillors like to talk to the recommendation? Sorry. Councillor Benton.
Mr. Mayor, this is probably it's in my ward, and I've had several telephone conversations with local community. I must admit, when I first came across it, I was not very happy about some of the aspects of it, being to the material carted down there. And I know the planning scheme have done an utmost job to try and address the situation of just looking at the operations on the land there. I still have reservations of how this, particularly the site where it is, with the water being able to stay within the bunting. I don't see where the bunting is going to go around, I would say, the northwest side of this site. I believe it is on the southern side, but it's not on the northwest side of the site, which leads into the drainage that goes down through the properties that are adjacent onto the western side. So with that, it makes me a little bit uneasy. And I know a lot of things in relationship to this has got, won't be allowed to operate until this is done. It won't be allowed to operate until that's done. And I was referring to the road in, it won't be allowed to be operated until the road is constructed to the standard that is put down before it. I just wonder whether we're letting the horse bolt before we can get control of it again, because we haven't got the resources to be able to go out and enforce everything that gets there. whether we are sort of not making sure the thing's done properly for the start. And I would just like to ask Steve one question. Does the officers actually get it for a home building, you get a certificate of occupancy? The officers will go out and ask or visit the site and say, right, you can operate or you can't operate.
Yes, so there's a number of conditions on the draft set of conditions that says prior to commencement of the approved use, you have to do certain things. That means that they can't operate until those things are completed, and we will go out there and check to make sure that that happens.
They get some sort of a certificate or something to say you can operate.
No, they can't. They don't get a certificate to say you can't operate. But once they comply with the conditions, they will get confirmation that okay, these conditions are complied with and you can operate. That's not necessarily a certificate that put in the form of a letter or something.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So I'm still in 2 minds, Mike. Where are we going to go? So I'll see what the other councillors say around the table.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to talk on the recommendation? Before I just ask you a quick question, Stephen Swart. No? Stephen Swart, as if North East Catchment Management came back and said, no, this is a bad idea, there's huge potential for shalings to run down into the creek system, etc., that would change the recommendation greatly as a referral authority and a determining authority at that time.
Definitely would have a big impact on the recommendation. As a determining referral authority, we have to go with what they say. If it's an objection, we have to review the application. In this instance, we didn't get any such of question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bustle, if there's no other councillor who'd like to talk for or against the application, Councillor Bustle, as the mover, you will round off the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I appreciate the concern, and I appreciate that all the people that's come here tonight have come over from Mumbai, and I understand your concerns, and I have spoken extensively with the operator, and I've spoken extensively with our planning department. I feel there's a lot of checks and balances, and obviously they have to comply. So I think that I'm very happy that to support this. We have many other processing plants in the Royal City Wangaratta, and I think the checks and balances that Steve and staff have done, they've done a lot of work. I'm quite comfortable. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation, raise their hands. The recommendation is carried. Thank you. All those against the recommendation, I'll go there. Councillor Herry and Councillor Benton. Thank you. We will now move on to item 16.4. Of that, I'll declare my conflict of interest as I own land in this area, in this land estate, and I will be excusing myself from the meeting. Thank you.
Could you just explain that it's going ahead? You said earlier it wasn't going ahead tonight, so...
Sorry, I never said that. I said we would come to the vote where it could or couldn't go ahead. So at this stage it's been approved for council. It's now up to objectives. If you want to take it further, you now need to take it to...
Without any external studies. I hope you all enjoy losing your houses. Goodbye.
Will we be notified of it being approved?
All objectives, Steve?
Yes.
Yes. In writing, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So then,
Thank you. So we're now on to 16.4, planning permit application, 21213 Fairway Drive. Stephen, would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, yes. So this item is about that planning permit application for a 5-lot subdivision and also dwelling on each of those lots. at number 8 Fairway Drive, Wangaratta. An application was referred to relevant referral authorities with no objections in response, and notice of the application was also given as required by the Planning and Environment Act. As a result of that, we received 14 objections and 3 letters of support. So 14 objections, I know the report says 12. We received an additional 2 objections since this report was finalized in the last few days. All issues raised by submissions have been considered as part of the officer's assessment. So even those issues raised in the latest 2 objections received, they have been covered by the officer's assessment. Based on the merits assessment of the proposal having regard to the relevant policies, objectives and decision guidelines in the Wangaratta planning scheme, it's the officer's recommendation that council issue a notice of decision to grant the permit subject to the conditions contained in attachment 1.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody from the gallery would like to speak for or against this recommendation? So if you just please state your name. Thank you.
And I live at 27 Fairview Drive. One of the biggest issues is the lack of disclosure in finding out by chance that this proposal exists. So it may fall within the guidelines of the planning permit, which is fine, but emotionally, not one resident knew this was happening. So you have an entire residential estate going, like, how did that happen? So I understand technically it could go through, but no consideration for us as a community. If you approve it, you're going against our entire community. That was not what we bought. We were so low density zone housing, and that was why we bought it. We bought premium land, and the proposal just contravenes everything we bought into. So I'm sure other people will have comments as well, especially the young man that is adjacent to the proposal. So really, I think we're just let down. We're let down by the developer, Bonzo, and total lack of disclosure. I know planning did send out the permit again, it was reissued, but that shouldn't have happened. We should have known when it was issued.
All right. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Thank you.
My name's Alan Morrison.
So just one moment. Yes, Stephen, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yes, please. Thank you. I've just written down 2 key points there. One is the lack of disclosure or notice. In this instance, council provided notice as required by the Planning and Environment Act, and then it became clear to us that there was some issue with that notice because we got reports back from the community saying, hang on, we haven't received that yet. At that point in time, we made the decision that we would give us a second set of notice, and that went through earlier this year. And then we provided some additional time for people to provide submissions. And I think the result of that is that we did receive 17 submissions on this. So that illustrates that at least some people did get this and used the opportunity. Not sure exactly why that first notice went wrong, but certainly tried to fix that by providing a second chance at it. In terms of another point that you made, you mentioned that the land is zoned low density residential zone. This is something that was raised in a number of submissions where I think the perception is that this is an area that's zoned low density residential. The area is not zoned low density residential, it's zoned general residential zone. That's the same zone that you find in most residential areas in Wangaratta. But I do recognise that the character of that subdivision is of lower densities that you find in other places. So I just wanted to make sure that that's a clear point, that the zoning is not low density residential zone.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, the rest of them I'm at 19 Fairway Drive, so we went further down on the left. So you've answered the question on, it's interesting, I'm reading through the response from the planning department about the letters. There was no letters received. It says there was, in this response here, that there was some letters weren't received, it was 0, there was none. So just want to clarify that on the first initial letters, none were received at all. The site was visited on the 21st of October, and there was only one house built at that time. Well, it was actually visited when this report was done. Okay, 21st of October, there was one house finished, and I'm pretty sure it was yours. The mine wasn't finished. There was only about 3 houses under construction. Okay. Just in the report, it even says from the planner himself, surrounding area was characterised by the golf course, and the opposite side of Wangaratta area on the road is low density residential use and development is predominant. So the area is predominantly low density residential. Okay? It even says it here in this report, so that's great. There was a big concern from some of the residents about traffic and parking. Now they have allowed for parking for the residents of the units. They've only allowed, looks like from the plans, about car parking for 1 or maybe 2 cars at best. Okay. And if you read the plans, the driveway is 20 metres from the roundabout. From the roundabout, the entrance is about 20 metres from a roundabout, and there's nowhere to park on Fairway Drive. You go for a drive down there, it's 0, you can park off the road. My visitors, they park on the driveway. There's no parking. So, concern is about traffic. We're going to get a lot of traffic from stage 2 and 3 because the other roundabout's not done yet. No idea when that's going to be built. The other entrance down further is just blocked off. That could be years away. Right? You're talking about a multi-million-dollar roundabout there to go out to all the different residential estates. So everyone that builds in 2 and 3, there's only one place to get in and out. And that's up and around that roundabout. So traffic is going to be a big issue for the residents that reside there. They also changed the requirement for water tanks to 2,500 litres. Again, that small roof area double story. They're going to go back and do that for the people that have to put 5,000 litre tanks in their double stories, but the main put 5,000 litre in. So what is it? Which is it? 2.5, 5? Not sure. So it's changed for this one. Just need to know. It's just a question of why we change that. The letters, we've covered the letters. So the estate, so this is straight from the report from the planning department. The key difference for the proposed development in comparison to the other developments is the scale of the building. That's what we're concerned about. 5 units back to back, one giant building that looks like a motel.
So I'll just stop you there before we go too far. Stephen and Marcus, would you like to respond to the questions there so far, please?
Yeah, trying desperately to keep up with the questions that's been asked. So some of those things you mentioned are more statements than other things, so I will accept that they are not questions.
So the traffic, in terms of the traffic,
Yeah,
the
so,
driveway is 20 minutes from there.
so when it comes to traffic, it is something that has been assessed as part of this application. What we do when it comes to that, we refer the application off to our technical services department. They will turn their minds to, the traffic that could be generated by a development like this and make a recommendation whether that's acceptable or not. In this case, no objections were raised around the traffic that could be generated by this specific development. I'll also talk about parking very quickly.
So no objections from who?
From Council's Infrastructure Services Directorate, and I'm part of that. So,
Plenty on the objections,
to say
the
that-
objections you got from the residents.
Yeah, make no objections about traffic,
Yeah.
but that aspect and that concern has been assessed as part of the process.
But you've also got the golf course. Their
So-
car parking
So just 1 moment, please. So just let Stephen say it, please. So there's no interjection. Thank you.
The thing that we related to that was also car parking. Each of the sites provide sufficient car parking to meet the requirements in the planning scheme. Each unit has a double garage, and there's also provision for visitor car park there. So that is sufficient to meet the requirements of the planning scheme. That Those are the requirements that we have to assess the application against.
And that's fine, but you've got 5 units with double garages, that's fine, they're all accommodated cars, and you've got space for 2 car parks for visitors. You've got 5 houses, 2 car parks, right on a roundabout, and no parking.
Yes, and that meets the requirements of the planning scheme. If we were requiring anything above that, there's no obligation on the applicant to provide that, and we would not be able to defend that in the future.
So Michael, I'll just take one more question, please, Michael. We normally allow 2 questions, and I think
Okay, sorry about
you've
that.
done a pretty good go.
No, that's okay, no, you're fine, I didn't know that, so
That's all right.
I don't know that, I would have only asked, until I really wanted to answer part.
So you've got one more, did you really want to answer?
Yeah. So, just on, so I wrote a letter to an email to the planning department in February asking for when the change of permit was issued in January 2019. So I know this is not oversight by council, but when we signed our section 32, it had the old permit in it. So all I asked was, when was the new permit issued to the vendor? So that it would actually get into the section 32. Because we purchased with the wrong permit in the actual document. No, it's not oversight by council, I get that. But it's just poor form by the actual sale of the vendor that they've actually got the wrong permit in there 10 months after it's issued. So all I'm asking for is when was it issued to the vendor so we can take that action against the vendor.
You need to take the question of notice, Stephen.
I do have that information somewhere, I just need to find it. So I think you are referring to the subdivision
Change
permit. Yeah, so with that subdivision permit, if I recall correctly, without that in front of me, initially was either issued in 2016 or 17, and then in 2019 there was an application to amend that permit.
21st of January.
That application was to clarify some of the wording of the conditions, and you mentioned 21st of January.
Yep, they changed that section from dedicated golf course accommodation to possible. That was the change.
Yeah, so originally it said future golf course accommodation or something along those lines, and that was changed to possible future golf.
It said dedicated in the original one.
Yeah. So that happened in, I'm going to have to take the word for it, in January 2009.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions from the floor? Please state your name.
My name is Kevin Mountney. I want to thank the council for arranging this meeting and allowing us to pay this down. My concern is with the parking. I've looked at your plans, or the plans for these units. There's 5, 3 of them are 3-bedroom, 2 are 4-bedroom. So to me, that's indicating you encourage families to move into these. The average family in Australia, in Wangaratta, has 2 cars. Fair enough, it's a 2-car garage. But we're in a beautiful spot, and a lot of people have boats, caravans and stuff, and there's 1 or 2 visitors parking. There's a bit of visitors parking out the front, but that's for visitors. I don't think the parking's adequate.
So, Stephen, would you respond to that?
The response that I'll provide is the same one that I provided before, which is the requirements of the planning scheme are met by this application. It would not really be reasonable for us to say, well, in this case you need to provide a number of additional car parking above what the planning scheme requires, because it would be very hard to defend that position should that be challenged.
All right, I'll ask you, where would you expect someone to park their boat?
And again, please.
Where would you expect someone to park their boat if they've got 2 cars?
There's people that have boats and caravans that live in places that don't have storage facilities, and storage facilities are one of the options that people go for. There's a variety of other options available. They might know somebody with enough storage. It's not up to the planning process to determine where people will park their caravans and boats.
I hope that's answered your question there. Do you have a further question?
Yes, I do. I was saying, let's look at the plans, and there's a lot of restrictions, especially on the Yarrawonga Wangaratta Road, as far as what the property looks like from the rear. These units look like the back of Bunnings schools. in the back.
So can I just clarify, when you say a lot of restrictions, you are talking about the restrictions that apply to the other lots in the subdivision?
Especially along the Wangaratta Road.
There are some restrictions on the remaining lots in this subdivision that lots along the Yaronga Road has to present to the Yaronga Road, so that's just one example of a restriction. That restriction does not apply to this specific lot.
Why?
When the subdivision was done originally, the restriction was put in place specifically on a number of lots in the subdivision, and this lot was purposefully left out. That was not a mistake, that was by design. When I looked at the documentation and tried to cast my mind back as to what happened at that point, it's clear to me that a range of the restrictions that apply to the other sites in this lot were intended to apply to this lot. One of the other restrictions that come to mind is the fact that in the rest of the state you can't subdivide your lot any further.
That's correct.
That restriction does not apply to this lot.
So that lot has totally different standards.
Yep. You'll also notice that this lot is bigger in size than most of the other lots in the subdivision. Again, that's an indication that this lot was intended for a different type of building.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I think you've explained that very, very well. Any other questions from the floor? Thank you. If you could please state your name.
My name is Lionel Allpress. I've purchased a block that's directly next door to the proposed development. I don't really have any questions. They've all been answered. I just wanted to point out that the proposed building is completely out of character for the estate. As it's been said, we all purchased in there as was a golf course estate, a little bit more land. This proposed development is going to completely block my view of the Warbies or anything else out there. And the design of the building, as you would have all seen, is very obnoxious. It's not a very good, it's a bit of an eyesore to the entrance of the estate. I had quite a few other points in regards to parking and noise and that sort of thing as well, but they've been answered, so that's all I've got.
So thank you, I'll take it as a comment. Thanks, Mr. Allpress. So if there's no further questions from the floor, I'll look to Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, we have the recommendation in front of us, and I propose to put forward an alternative motion, and that is that Council number 1 issues a notice of refusal to grant a permit in respect of planning permit application PL 21213 for the development of 5 dwellings and 5 lot subdivision at 8 Fairway Drive, Wangaratta, Lot 1 PS 819139, in accordance with Section 61 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 on the following grounds. A, that the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the general residential zone. B, that the scale and bulk of the proposed development is inconsistent with local neighbourhood character. C, that the design of the proposed development does not present to Wangaratta Yarrawonga Road as its primary frontage and therefore inconsistent with local neighbourhood character. D, the density of the proposed development is inconsistent with local neighbourhood character. And 2, advises the applicant and submitters of this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Can I have a second of the motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Grant, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Thank you. Now, I'm opposing the application on the grounds outlined in the motion that I put forward that's been seconded by Councillor Fitzpatrick. I've seen this subdivision evolve over a period of time, and from the outset it was proposed to be a high quality, low density housing estate surrounded by trees and shrubs and on one of Wangaratta's more attractive entrances, building on what was already a very attractive bushland and golf course setting. Restrictions were placed on the housing lots to ensure that there was a consistency in the type of house built in Fairway Drive, and these restrictions were aimed at ensuring the lifestyle and amenity of the area would be developed and maintained. These restrictions, however, do not seem to have applied to the applicant, which I believe is completely inconsistent with orderly planning and outcomes for the rural city of Wangaratta, but also sends a very poor message to prospective home builders in our community. I do not want to get in the way of progress, but this building proposal will compromise the character and amenity of what is one of Wangaratta's more attractive housing estates. It's a pity that there hasn't been any appetite by the applicant to perhaps modify the proposal. If it were to be modified, I believe that it could still go ahead, but with a design that's much more in keeping with the location. So I've given it much thought, and I think that while we support development in the rural city of Wangaratta, I think there are times when the development is completely inappropriate and certainly out of character with what's already in place and what was proposed in the first instance.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Anybody else like to speak for or against? Councillor Herring.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bussell. Look, I see, I appreciate a lot of the concerns that have been raised this evening. I feel a number of them have been answered by Director Swart to the satisfaction of the planning scheme in many ways. When I look at this development, the proposed development, and people throw comments out that it looks like a motel or it doesn't fit in with the rest of the character of the rest of the development, I can definitely appreciate those comments, because in many ways it doesn't, and subjectively you could look at it and say, I like it or I don't like it. And very many people have said that I don't like it. Unfortunately, that subjective aspect is difficult to bring into a planning decision. There's the notion of neighbourhood character, which is utilised in this sort of decision making, and it's a bit of a hard one to put your finger on, especially with the block in question. And we must remember that it is being treated differently, because from the very get-go, that, as Director Swart suggested, was by design. It was always intended to be treated differently, hence why it originally strongly indicated it would be for golf course accommodation, and in subsequent iterations of the application, perhaps less strongly so. But still, it's a different outcome that was intended for that piece of land. So, but when we come back to that concept of neighbourhood character, you do have to take into consideration the whole neighbourhood. It does sit on the edge at a bit of an interface, and when you look south down the street, you see a range of different designs and different architectural aspects of the houses that are very eclectic. I don't think you could dispute that. But they are of a distinct nature. They're detached units, and they do have a lot of space around them, setbacks and the greenery, and they have certain characteristic. But then if you look north, there's a car park northeast. There's a proposed golf course development on the other side, as per the planning application. So that's obviously got a very different feel around it, and that is part of the neighbourhood that needs to be considered in the neighbourhood character consideration. But having said all that, I feel like, while I agree with most components of the planning report and the officer's perspective on things. I feel like the one characteristic of neighbourhood character that it really doesn't even seem to try to appease is the bulk and the hulking kind of form of the structure. I'm not inclined to object outright, however, I will foreshadow that I will put another motion up on the table that will have some additional planning conditions that will speak to that kind of hulk form of the structure and try to mitigate that a little bit.
Thank you,
All right,
Councillor.
thank you.
Anyone else like to speak for or against? Councillor
Thanks,
Fitzpatrick.
Deputy Chair. I just want to say, Jack, before we do that, we've got to see if this motion gets up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Paul.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just echoing both previous speakers in regards to hearing what the many people that contacted us had to speak in regards to their concerns, and thanking them for taking the time to reach out in a number of channels to voice their concerns in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. This development from day one has sort of had a rocky road to me. It's been one thing, and then when you have a look at it, it doesn't seem to appeal what it was actually put forward to us in the early days of the development. However, I did read the report in 2017 by the independent panel, and it said at the time what was proposed was consistent with the neighbourhood character, and that was 5 detached buildings on this block specifically. Now we have another development, which is a motel, is going to be there, and I don't have any objections to these being in the right place, and I don't think this is in the right place. I think these sort of developments that have been proposed for this block should be in a more urban, centralised city. I know it comes under your general zoning rule 1 for general, and you can have them. But I am afraid that if we're going to have neighbourhood character, which is a reference to the planning scheme, we should be a little bit more consistent and make sure that these, if he wants to develop them, they are detached, not in a tourist type town building. In my opinion, it's neighbourhood character, because it was an independent panel that at that time agreed that what was going to be there was going to be for golf accommodation to be a detached building. This is not going to be for golf building, it's going to be for residential buildings, residential residents. So I'm going to support the motion that Councillor Grant has put up in relationship to the development going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. So before Councillor Grant finishes off, I'd just like to say that I'm inclined to support the planning department here, because I'm just not sure how we're going to defend Councillor Grant's motion. So thank you, and Councillor Grant, if you'd like to finish.
Yes, I will. Look, I understand. In planning is one of those very, very difficult. As today we're seeing with the planning application that was on the table prior to considering this, it's never easy for council to make a decision. But from my perspective, I think, as I said, I've seen this development evolve over a period of time. I know what the intent was, and I think somewhere along the line something has been lost. It may be that it'll have to go to VCAT, but I think it is something that we need to think about what we want to see in Wangaratta in terms of development and development that is in keeping with the character of what is already in place. And certainly, as I said previously, Yarrawonga Road is one of our more attractive areas in terms of development, and I think that's something that we should foster and support into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. So put the motion to vote, please. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1, 2, Thank you. If Stephen Swart could call the meeting, please.
Deputy Mayor, could I put forward a motion to suspend orders while those that want to leave, but also for any councillors that need a toilet break to also have that moment in time.
Too much water.
So we'll just deal with the standing orders. Second for that. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Mayor can come back and
Toilet break.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome back. Thank you everybody for coming all the way to Cardboard from Wangaratta. It's a privilege to see you all out here. Thank you.
That comes in to resume standing. Okay, are we on pause with the live streaming? Excuse me, Zoe, are we on pause? The live stream? Still live. Okay, thank you. I'd like to put a recommendation forward to resume standing orders back to 14.1. I'll move that recommendation. Councillor Bustle to second that. Are all in favour? That recommendation to resume standing orders is moved. Carried. Sorry, thank you for that word. I'll move to corporate services 14.1, which is the revocation of related parties and interest policy. Thank you, Director Sarah Brindley.
Thank you, Marius, and hopefully a few of these are a bit easier for you all in your decision making. So this first report is presented to Council before we vote for related parties and interest policy 2017. It's purely an administrative process. That policy is no longer required because it's now provided for in the new Local Government Act. So over to you.
Thank you. As the recommendation stands there, thank you, Director Brindley. Are there any questions from the gallery? Thank you. No. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Perry and Councillor Grant to second that. Would any councillor like to talk on the recommendation? That goes no. I'll ask for the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. 14.2, please, Director Brindley. Q2 forecast review.
Thank you. So we report quarterly to the community on Council's financial position and also our forecast for this full financial year. Just to provide a brief summary, we are projecting a decrease in our accounting surplus by 2.75 million to 7.73 million surplus. That is driven really by two things, more related to the balance sheet than our cash position. So one is increased depreciation coming from the revaluation of infrastructure assets and their useful lives, and that's part of a repeat process that we undertake. And the second is capitalisation changes where we capitalise capital works that we undertake throughout the year, but sometimes in those projects there are assets which council doesn't actually own. And in this case we did works as part of the railway precinct upgrade. Some of works within that were on assets not specifically owned by council, so we write those off as opposed to depreciating those. So it doesn't affect materially our overall cash position. It's a depreciation change. There are also some new capital works projects coming into the budget. So we're looking at increasing the capital works by 2.42 million overall. Some of those projects include, and a number of these are primarily grant funded, which is a really good outcome for the community. So there's aerodrome wildlife fencing of $225,000, a new waste truck, COVID safe outdoor activation, which is $460,000 fully funded. Transfer station upgrades for glass collection and the purchasing of gym equipment for the WISAC. So overall, the recommendation is for councillors to endorse the Q2 forecast review, which includes the reduction to the projected accounting surplus of $2.75 million, an increase to the capital works budget of $2.42 million, and an environmental upgrade agreement quarterly statement, which is a statement that we provide on a quarterly basis, providing evidence of the funding for climate adaptation building upgrades that's administered through the council. So that's just a standing point for you to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ridley. No questions from the gallery. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Benton as a seconder. Any Councillor Fitzpatrick, do you need to talk on this? Councillor Benton? No? Any other councillor on the floor would like to talk? Councillor Grant first and then Councillor Herrick.
Well, I would, in supporting the recommendation, I would also suggest that people take a read of this particular report and get an inkling of the breadth of the business of council, and you know how we have to be juggling balls all the time to do all the things that we need to do all the things that we like to do, and then also balance our budget at the end of all of that. And the task isn't easy, and I actually want to acknowledge the great work, and I'm just blown away by our finance people and the way that they can respond to change, and they've been able to do things that have been really very worthwhile, but also very creative and very productive as well. So I think everyone should read our budget.
Thank you. Councillor Herrick.
It's on. Yeah, I think well said, Councillor Grant. I do just want to note that, of course, it will impact our underlying adjusted results as well. But we do have to recognise that budgets, year to year, need to be put into consideration with respect to how they perform over a number of years. And we definitely have checks and measures in that over a rolling 5-year period to ensure that it does remain healthy. Definitely have great faith in the finance and budgeting team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Councillor Fitzpatrick, no reply. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Director Ridley, 14.3, the biannual audit and risk report, please.
Yeah, thank you. So the Local Government Act requires that Council's Audit and Risk Committee prepare a biannual audit and risk report that describes the activities of the committee and include its findings and recommendations. So this is the provision of that report, and the recommendation is for Council to note the biannual audit and risk report attached to this report. Thank you.
No questions from the gallery on that one. A mover, Councillor Fuller, seconder, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Fuller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just drawing attention to the word noting, and that we not only note it but have a look through. This is one of our most important sort of audit reports back to us as a group of 7, and just acknowledging the work that's been done in the last couple of years for Sarah and her team to get that report to a much more healthier situation. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzpatrick? No. Any other councillor like to talk on that? Councillor Herry?
Yeah, absolutely. Support Councillor Fuller's comments, and just thank the Audit and Risk Committee again, and just want to acknowledge the progress made on particularly the findings that came out of Vargo regarding the annual report, financial statements and the performance statements, just a number of audit items there which have been actioned. and there are various new processes in place ahead of a future interim audit, which is good to see. But there's also been good progress on a number of the internal audit items. And lastly, this report refers to the Environmental Management and Sustainability Audit, which is a piece of work that the Audit and Risk Committee are working on at the moment and just finishing up. And it'll be good to have that one considered, and will also inform some other decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Herrick. Councillor Fuller, did you need to respond? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Director Brindley, 14.4 is a Council Plan Strategic Indicators and Actions Update for Q2 October to December 21.
Thank you. So Council has a 4-year Council plan that sets out the key priorities and activities that we commit to delivering for the community as an organisation, and that is founded on significant community consultation and engagement, which was undertaken over a year ago now. So we are required to and provide biannual reporting to the community for full transparency about how we are going in terms of implementing those actions, and also some strategic indicators that are identified as important in the Council plan. So this report provides that update as of the end of Q2. I would note we're obviously towards the end of March now, so there will have been substantial progress made since these measures were reported on. I think probably the main thing to note, particularly in terms of our strategic indicators, is the recovery that we were seeing at the end of Q2 and continue to see, and so particularly in our leisure and recreation areas of usage of our facilities and involvement in those as COVID restrictions have eased. So we're seeing a number of improvements in our performance there as people are able to get out and about a bit more. And the recommendation here is for Council to note the Q2 2021 to 2022 results for the Council plan, strategic indicators and actions as contained in the attached reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. No questions from the gallery. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Grant. Councillor Fuller to second. Councillor Grant, anything to talk on the recommendation? No. Councillor Fuller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the at-risk ones is low attendance at the art gallery, so I encourage everybody as soon as possible to get in there and just have a look at what's going on there and boost that number to put it back to on par. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? No. Councillor Grant, as a reply, no.
Well, perhaps to almost reiterate what Councillor Fuller said and encourage people to join up the gym.
Change those indicators, right?
Get to show at the Performing Arts Centre as well.
I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, the recommendation is carried. Last one, Director, is Wangaratta Livestock Exchange Strategic Plan.
Thank you. So the Wangaratta Livestock Exchange is a wholly owned subsidiary of Council, and they're operated by a board who operate under a management services agreement, an MSA. That requires the board to develop a 5-year strategic plan with their vision and key areas of action for the Wangaratta Livestock Exchange. This report is for Council to consider and approve that plan. It is attached as a confidential document because we do operate the WLE, or they operate the WLE as a commercial going concern. Excuse me. But I can confirm that in terms of the requirements of the MSA, the board have included in this plan all the information that is required of them, so it's compliant in that regard. So Council is over to you to consider and approve the Wangaratta Livestock Exchange Strategic Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. No questions from the gallery. I'll put the recommendation forward. Someone to move the recommendation. Councillor Benton and Councillor Bustle to second it. Councillor Benton, anything to say on the WLE?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think this has been a long time coming, this document actually. It might be over 10 years since we had a plan, and that goes back before the board was implemented, and I think it's been a great achievement, and it's starting to prove its worth, the board's decision, Council's decision to put the board in play. In the document you'll see whether there's going to be further development going on in the plan and the vision going forward, and it's starting to even start to make money. I think it's around about a profit of about 57,000 over in the last financial year. So I think that was a good result for the WLE. So I certainly recommend the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bussell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support what Councillor Benton said, and I want to take the opportunity to thank the board for the magnificent job they've done in this space at the Wangaratta Livestock Exchange, and certainly punching well above their weight. And with the guidance of the chair, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I'm personally very, very proud of the fact that it's set to one side of council and it's working. So to the board, well done.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd also like to say that the strategic plan is simple and basic, and that's all it needs to be. It's being run beautifully, and it's making money, and it'd be great to see you out there one day, Councillor Bussell, at the meeting to make sure that you're well aware of what goes on out there as a great farmer and landholder. We'd love to see it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it'd be a pleasure for both you and I to meet the chair of the board at the sale yards and have a cup of tea with you.
I meet the chair regularly, and I look forward to meeting again down there on the site. So thank you. Any other people like to talk?
And Mr. Mayor, I just hope that's taken up with the local media to let the chair know that how big it is.
Are there any further comments on the Wangaratta Livestock Exchange? No. So, Councillor Benton, did you need to end off? No. Well, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Brindley. I'll now introduce Director Marcus Goonan for Infrastructure Services, and we will do 15.1, which is our Waste Service Policy 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is presented to Council to endorse the placing of the Draft Waste Services Policy 2022 on public exhibition, seeking feedback from the community. A review was undertaken by Council officers, and from that review only one change is proposed from the Waste Service Policy that was put out in 2021, and that change is in relation to the 4-strike contamination policy. The recommendation is that Council endorse the draft waste policy to go on public exhibition for 28 days, inviting submissions from the community and stakeholders until the close of business 30th of April. 2, if no submissions are received, no submissions requiring change to the waste services policy are received, adopt without further resolution of Council.
Thank you, Director Goonan. No comments from the gallery. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Herry to second. Councillor Fitzpatrick, anything to talk on this issue?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a topic that comes up frequently, waste, so I really do encourage public submissions to come through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herry as the seconder, would you like to talk?
Yeah, absolutely encourage public submissions and ideas on this document. It's all up for grabs and up for comment. But yeah, as Director Goonan indicated, there is just one proposed change in the document, and that regards is in relation to our 4-strike policy, which is largely a mechanism for Council to try and mitigate and control against contamination from our curbside waste streams. So the change, the current situation is that there's 4 opportunities for a curbside yellow lid or green lid bin to have a significant amount of contamination. And that's a great problem because it can then obviously get into the truck and contaminate the whole load and cause a big drag down on resources. Or even send the whole truckload, if there's enough contamination, to landfill, which is definitely not what we want to be happening. We want more of the recyclables, more of the organic matter to be diverted and treated appropriately as a valuable resource. But the change is going to be that after 4 strikes are up, there will be the Council's discretion to withhold the withdrawn service for up to 4 years, just to prevent it going back out and then going through the 4 strikes again and having the contamination issue. But Director Goonan has assured us that it's not just going to be a set it and forget it 4-year removal, and the situation will be monitored, and if changes occur and the team sees an opportunity for a green or yellow bin to get back into play, they'll definitely take that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just noting there's 3 public holidays in this submission period, so don't leave it till tomorrow. Put on your nightstand tonight and please read it and submit your feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Any other councillor there? No. Councillor Fitzpatrick to end off? Nothing? No. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Director Goonan, 15.2, Concrete Works, Panel of Supplies.
This report is presented to Council to award the supplies for a minor concrete works panel. Council officers undertake capital and renewal works each year. Some of these works involve minor concrete works. These are currently tendered to an external market. This panel will just enable council officers to respond a little bit more quickly to some of these minor works and help with council delivering their capital works. The recommendation is that council awards the contract for minor concrete works panel of suppliers to the suppliers named within the recommendation, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal all relevant contract documents.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Question from the gallery, please step forward. Oh, you can step from there, you've got a loud enough voice.
So Anne Johnston, just in relation to 15.2, 15.3, you make reference to minor works. There is actually no definition of what minor works entails, because they're both confidential evaluation reports. So minor works could be $50,000 or it could be $100. So it would be really helpful within this report to quantify what minor works means, and it would be also interesting to understand why minor works can't be completed by our current staff, because we have amazing arborists and we have the infrastructure and we own equipment, etc. to do that. So if it is minor, why are we not undertaking that with our own staff and workers?
Thank you, Director.
No worries. So thank you very much for the questions. So minor is really just around the dollar value, and when we talk about panel suppliers, we go out to panel, or we can go out to panel suppliers for up to $150,000. That's how the panels work. We tend to only use the panels when we have overflow of work. So if we've got the ability to do it ourselves, then we will do it ourselves. As I think you probably appreciate this year, if we're talking about 15.3, there's been a lot of tree work to be done, so we've needed to bring contractors in. And I can talk more to that when we get to 15.3, but it certainly is not around either reducing our staff's ability to be able to do work. It's really about enabling council to be able to respond to what the community needs are and complete works as quick as we possibly can, and within budget.
Thanks, Anne. Good question. No other questions from the floor. I'll look for a mover, Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Benson. Councillor Fuller, do you need to talk on this? Councillor Benson, do you need to talk? Would any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Okay, I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. 15.4, continue on that with the... Sorry, 15.3, the minor tree services panel supplies.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council to award suppliers to the position panel to provide minor tree services. Council undertakes capital and renewal work each year. This panel will support the current ongoing maintenance and project service delivery provided by Council. The recommendation is that Council awards the contract for the minor tree services panel to the suppliers listed in the recommendation, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal relevant documents when available.
Thank you. Questions from the gallery. Part of the Anne's question from before. Yep. Was the previous notice?
So this tree services panel is not only physical works, it's also around contractors. So it's around being able to get tree assessments done. A number of different services that we don't offer in-house, such as stump grinding and things like that. So it's actually about covering off on lots of things that we can't do. We also have a current lack in the market of arborists, and it is difficult right at this point in time for council to recruit for arborists. So this will also cover off some of those as well.
So my question to that is that I have actually been seeing that the qualified staff know applying for the job, or is it the job environment that is stopping people from applying for it? Because we have had people who have worked in the tree crew that have moved into different avenues like bridge crews and road crews, etc. So is the environment of the tree crew not conducive, or is it that there just isn't people who want the arborists anymore?
Yes, it's definitely the latter. Most of the arborists have been taken up by private companies who are extremely busy at the moment, and that they have the ability to be able to offer potentially things that council can't, particularly from a dollar point of view. So it is definitely the latter. There is also a number of arborists who are just getting out of the trade. It is quite a difficult trade, and it's very labour intensive. We are not the only council that is experiencing this. We talk to the local councils around us, and they're all experiencing the same problem. And you can see from the number of tenderers that we have for this panel, there is a number of private suppliers out there. So it is really around just the numbers out there, nothing to do with council's work environment.
Thanks, Anne. I'd love to see that amount of tenderers on some of our other jobs, Marcus, would be fantastic. Yeah. Okay, I'll look for a mover, please. Councillor Bussell and Councillor Fuller. Councillor Bussell, you need to talk on the recommendation. Councillor Fuller, no? Anybody else like to talk? Any other councillor? No? I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. 15.4, which is the Whitfield Street Cascade intersection works.
This report is presented to council the evaluation and recommendation for the contract award for the Whitfield Streetscape and intersection improvements. Council received $4 million in funding from the Victorian Government as part of the King Valley Prosecco Road Revitalisation Project. The Whitfield Streetscape and intersection upgrade project is a redevelopment of the existing streetscape to include physical, social and economic functions of the area, including the overall amenity. Works include construction of road pavement, underground drainage, landscaping, feature lighting and service relocation. This work is a key item from the rural placemaking project that Council endorsed back in 2019 and says it continue on with those works. The project is also a collaboration with both Vic Roads and North East Water, allowing for additional works to undertake the safety improvements of the existing Y intersection on the Wangaratta Whitfield Mansfield Whitfield Road, in addition to the installation of a new water main. Recommendation that Council awards the contract Whitfield Streetscape intersection improvements to O'Loughlin Excavations, subject to signing funding agreements with RRV and North East Water. Authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the relevant contract documents when available and discloses the contract amount.
Thank you. No questions from the gallery. I'll have a mover, Councillor Bussell, and Councillor Herry. Do you have a second there? Yes. Councillor Bussell, would you like to talk, please?
Mr. Mayor, I would love to talk on this one. I know we've got many agenda items tonight, and there's been a lot of interest in some of the agenda items, but I can assure this one's where I've got most of my interest tonight. Firstly, I want to thank Director Gurn for the work with his team, with Marsha and Tatum. It hasn't been the easiest project to get through. I won't go over time, Councillor Benson. And this is, if my colleagues approve to award this tonight, this will be, to my knowledge, the biggest infrastructure spend south of the Hume Freeway in history by council. And I think that's significant. This will change the look of Whitfield to a really, really beautiful town with lovely trees that everybody's missed for years when they were cut down. And I can't tell you how excited I will be to see this contract awarded tonight. It will just make this town a beautiful town and highlight the value, not only for tourists to the King Valley, and I stress this, not only for tourists, because our locals enjoy going to the King Valley as well. And I'm one that just absolutely enjoys going up to the King Valley for a variety of reasons. Not just to go to the wineries, I love going to the King Valley for all other reasons up there. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And I urge my colleagues to support this contract tonight because this is a magnificent contract we'll see come to fruition by the end of the year. And once again, Director Gerner, I thank you for the work you've done up there and all your staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. I believe the live stream might have gone off during that time. Does Councillor Bustle need to repeat that again? Oh no, it didn't go off, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. That's great. Great to hear. Councillor Herry, as a seconder, did you want to talk on the project?
Certainly, thank you, Marys. Looks like Director Goonan is someone's favourite tonight. I just want to say that this particular set of works will definitely bring some much needed infrastructure improvements to the township of Wickfield, there's no doubt about that. Although I also want to note that there have been some concerns raised by various community members regarding various aspects of not just this package of works, but I guess this package in the context of a broader, $4 million package, which is often dubbed the Prosecco Road project. I largely feel that it revolves around the concern that this kind of development is being done with intentions that might compromise local community amenity and relax rural living feel of the town, just flat out in the pursuit of economic developments and increasing tourism in an area. I do want to acknowledge that the funding of this project, courtesy of the state government, is certainly intended to develop tourism and promote economic benefits and growth and the benefits that flow from tourism in an area. Definitely make no bones about that. But I do believe tourism is a great place to live, but not mutually exclusive. It just takes a bit of working together on everyone's part to get it right. So on the balance, I definitely support this set of infrastructure works and believe they'll lay foundations that will benefit tourists, visitors and locals alike, as Deputy Bustle has intimated. However, in order for the benefit to be for all parties in the long run, we definitely do have to continue to monitor the impacts that development does have on our townships and ensure that we are listening to concerns of residents living there and maintaining a good balance between economic outcomes and the livability of these townships. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to talk on the streetscape there? Councillor Bustle, did you want to end off, or are you happy to go to the vote?
You'd have to say it again, do you? We'll go to the vote.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. 16 development. Oh, sorry, we do need to disclose the contract price for that. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might just need a couple of minutes to confirm that. I think I've got the wrong price written down here, so 2 seconds.
Right.
To carry on with the next item.
We'll carry on and come back to that one. Thank you. Item 16, Development Services. Again, Stephen Sport, welcome back to the table. And for conversation, we'll go to 16.1, Draft Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Policy.
Thank you. The draft climate mitigation and adaptation policy has been prepared to tie together the work and actions committed to within the council plan, community vision, environmental sustainability strategy. The draft policy applies to decisions and activities relating to council operations. The draft policy was released for community feedback towards the end of last year, and in response to that, we received a number of submissions, in total 19 of those. Those submissions have been considered and they are included, or a summary of the submissions and council's response to those are included in the attachments to the report. The draft policy has been updated to include this feedback where appropriate, and proposed changes are shown in the attached draft policy as well. Council officers now recommend that Council adopt the climate mitigation and adaptation policy.
Thank you, Director. Any questions from the gallery on this? No. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Fuller and Councillor Grant. As a seconder, Councillor Fuller, did you need to talk on this? Would you like to talk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Keeping it short and sweet, this policy is going to guide us towards some aspirational endeavours, but we have to be mindful of our resources and what we're actually able to achieve as an organisation. And I look forward to the community also coming along on this journey in terms of their resources and them being empowered to achieve some of the outcomes that we're aspirationally trying to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else like to talk on this? Councillor Grant, please.
Totally agree with Councillor Fuller, because this policy gives us a framework and a direction to the way that the rural city of Wangaratta will address climate mitigation and adaptation in our municipality. In essence, it's a climate change policy. How we respond to the issue of climate change is complicated, and so much of what we need to do to respond and adapt into the future is unknown and uncosted. However, our approach must be measured. That is why we talk about adaptation and mitigation. We talk about what we know can be done and what we are able to do in a practical and immediate way. Every small step that we take towards a more sustainable future, we must take and share as a community, as Councillor Fuller said. I'm concerned that there's a tendency to press the panic button, but by assuming the panic, all we do is take on the responsibility for uncertain and unmeasurable outcomes. I hear other councillors have made strong statements, but I'm confident with this policy we will drive action and do what is possible both practically and financially. It's not what we say or how we say it, but what we actually do that will make the difference. I remind everyone that this is a policy that will be driven through the Environmental Sustainability Strategy and the Emissions Reduction Plan, both live and working documents. This is a journey that we're all on, and of course we will all share in different ways, but it's something that we'll do together.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any comments from the gallery? Councillor Benton.
Mr Mayor, I endorse the other two councillors, Fuller and Councillor Grant, and wholeheartedly with what they've said. But I did come across a document just recently, and it relates to the Union 12 climate adaptation strategy. I'm just starting to wonder, Mr Mayor, is this starting to become an industry on its own? And the strategy writing is in this document, there's 51 different public funded organisations, all with strategies that are in the Hume region. This is not throughout Victoria, this is just what we're in, and we're actually named in one of the back pages of it. And if you take, Mr Mayor, the public funds to do this, whether it's done in-house or not, every dollar, just a dollar, they took 10 cents out of the dollar. No wonder we're not getting very much done, just funding strategies. And I think somewhere along the line there's got to be a hole somewhere, and there's a lot of duplication, there must be duplication in these documents that we've got in front of us. And I think that we've got to have this by the act of the local government. We can't not avoid having a climate adaptation policy. It does give the community some ability to review it when it comes along, and the guidelines of the local government guidance does say, gives the guidance that we have to do to manage it the way we can with the resources that we've got available to us. And there'll be people out there who will say, whatever we do, whenever we spend it enough, and we some out there and we say what we do, we spend it too damn much. So just having a policy, I'm really against having a policy from the start, because we're getting directed by Spring Street all the time with these documents going forward. So it gives the community, though, to come back and alter the policy in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Benton, are you saying we would have more money to spend on change if we didn't have so many organisations directing what we should do for change?
You've only got to count it up. There's 51 of them, they all take 10 cents out of the dollar. Look, don't let the Einstein work out there, much be sure. Just writing policies.
Correct. Thank you. Councillor Herring.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. It's very much at our discretion, and the budget is definitely coming up in a couple of months to spend our money as we see fit, and nothing's really holding us back from emulating what a lot of other localities throughout the world, not just in Australia, have done to make great strides and advance and get beyond the relentless discussion and discussion around the value of actually writing a policy or a document or a strategy to guide us down that path and, in a sense, kind of beating around the bush and not getting anything done. But personally, just before I go on, I should actually mention that a couple of the submitters writing submissions on this document are related to me, and I just want to make full disclosure of that, one being my mum and another being my sister.
No, we don't have conflict. We saw conflict prior to, and I thank you, Councillor Harry, for mentioning that. We did investigate that through Brendan and our department there, so he's okay to talk.
We did investigate that, and it's very much, I was quite confident of it myself, but it's very much because the document is such a broad document that addresses everybody in the municipality. It's like if somebody commented on the rating strategy document. Everyone pays rates in the municipality. It doesn't have a particular impact or benefit or negative impact on any particular individual. It's just the same with climate change, really. It's going to impact on municipality. But this document is definitely an important next step along Council's journey in acknowledging and the acknowledgement of an integration of thinking that considers climate change throughout our operations. Just with respect, I'll finish shortly, but with respect to the adaptation plan, it's not a particular piece of work that is cited in this policy. However, there is a piece of work coming out of the Audit and Risk Committee that is referenced in this document, and one of the recommendations in that piece of work suggests Council conduct further pieces of work to embed the consideration of climate change throughout its operations, suggesting that perhaps we don't pay it enough heed with respect to risk mitigation, and also indicating a climate change adaptation plan document could be warranted. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Anybody else like to talk on that plan? No? Councillor Fuller, anything to end off as the mover? No? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Director Swart, Draft Side Road Management Plan 16.2.
Thank you. The Draft Roadside Conservation Management Plan 2022 is presented to Council for adoption following a period of community consultation. The plan is a revision of the 2014 plan and aims to conserve and enhance roadside native vegetation while also considering other roadside values and activities. The draft plan was made available for community feedback, and as a result we received 12 submissions. The submissions received have been considered and changes have been made to the draft plan in response where appropriate, and details of that can be found within the attachments to the agenda. Officers recommend that Council adopts the Roadside Conservation Management Plan 2022 as amended in response to submissions.
Any questions from the gallery on this? No. Mover, Councillor Benton. Are you happy to move that, Councillor Benton? To get it onto the table? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fuller, happy to second? Councillor Benton, as the mover, would you like to say a few comments? And a few. I
don't think I'll go as long as some of the others, but Mr. Mayor. This is another document that I had doubts why we have it, because it even states in the first part of this document it is only a directory. Although in the past, Council has used this document to be somewhat of a roadblock, and I have, but from going on from this document, and one reason I am supporting it, it has fleshed out a few things and anomalies that are within Council's control. And going on with that, I think we have to revise the local law number 1 ASAP to make this document as its recommendation, particularly in reference to crash grazing on roads. I also think that the emergency plan will give it some, when it comes out and as it's it's already out that the fire management plan that is with, it's going to be a sub-plan of that. It'll give it some sort of functionality and connection with the way it sits at the moment because of the roadside build-up. There's one thing I'm going to point out, and I've pointed it out to you in briefing, all the councils in briefing, is the Inspector General's report on the 1925 that the database of fuel load on some of the roads in areas will have to have a database or a data of the amount of load that is recognised that's on some of these roads. Because he's found that there is no data kept by any agency going forward, and if anything happens, I don't know how we're going to justify or get out of this situation, because it's already been noted by council in his report. I will also say that this roadside management plan only affects the rural people because it's outside the 80 k's, and it's even outside the 80 k's within the townships. So it really affects the rural part of the municipality. There also is there some reference to education, but even with our own staff and with the community going forward, because I think some of our own infrastructure has got to become to a point where some of the staff have been afraid to actually touch some vegetation that are impacting some of our own drainage system, which affects our own assets, being our roads, and they're mainly all gravel roads. So I think that having this plan has actually taught me how to flesh things out, and we can address these issues going forward. But the first one I think I would recommend, and I know it's not a recommendation or attachment to this, but to take on note that we revise the local law number 1.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to talk on this recommendation? I'd like to put forward that we do look at local law number 1, maybe we get briefed on local law number 1 and see where it lays in relation to this and look at that. So I'll support that for over the next few weeks. Thank you, CEO McGrath. If there's no other councillor that would like to talk on this recommendation, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? The roadside management conservation plan is moved. Carried, sorry. Thank you. I'll now go down as we draw to the final part of our evening. Sorry. Director Goonan, let's go back to item number, there's Whitfield Streetscape 15.4, Whitfield Streetscape intersection.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just one moment, Director. I don't think that's the case, but could you tell us the tender price?
Yeah, and apologies for not having that correct before. It is $1,771,703.56 excluding.
Thank you, and that's great. Thank you, Director Goonan. So we'll move down. We'll skip through 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 as there is none, but we have public question time, which allows anyone from the audience to get up and ask a public question if they feel. I will also go to some public questions that have been raised privately who couldn't be here tonight. So I'll go over them and I'll quickly read through 2 questions. And the first one is from Paula Griffiths. Council's approved of ARTC's plans to construct a massive bridge in Glenrowan that will heavily interfere with the views and visits to the Glenrowan Inn by its ramps and 5 metre high structure going well past the Anne Jones Inn, turning into the alleyway, into an alleyway. It will also cut access to Seed Street East and the Glenrowan station at Beaconsfield Street. Is Council aware that ARTC, in an email reply to an inquiry on the 5th of March 2019, stated that the bridge would be the most invasive option towards the heritage precinct? In the same email, ARTC had other options under consideration as of the 5th of March 2019. The Council's reply to my question on the 22nd of February 2022 failed to identify them. ARTC stated, "We have also considered relocating the bridge at the request of Council and the local improvers group. 7 locations were considered: Edward Street to Woolshed Street, Kelly to Cape Street, Kelly to Woolshed Road, Burns to Ned Street, boundary to Quarry Road, boundary to Moy Road. We also considered Edward to Woolshed Street, Kelly to Cape Street for a vehicle underpass. Were these options ever under consideration by Council? If so, why has it failed not to notify these options publicly? Will Council now seek the ARTC abandon its disruptive bridge, re-advertise these options and also consider the option to cut and cover undergrounding the line through Glenrowan? Director of Sport, would you like to answer this?
Yes, please. First of all, thank you for those questions. In response, I'll just read out what I've prepared before. Council's formal position on the Inland Rail project, as documented in a council resolution from April 21, includes in principle support for the ART's proposal to replace the existing Beaconsfield Parade Bridge at Glenrowan with a new bridge directly to the west of the existing bridge. That council resolution also supports the ARTC commencing the state government approval process for the proposed works at Glenrowan, and this process is ongoing. A visual representation of the proposed bridge is available on ARTC's website, including a 3D model and also a comparison between the proposed bridge and the existing bridge. And that should answer a lot of questions about design concerns. In answer to the specific questions in the submission, Council is not aware that the ARTC provided an email in March 9, 2019 that the proposed bridge would be the most invasive option towards the heritage precinct. One of the early options put forward by the ARTC for Glenrowan was to actually lower the railway track through that site to create the vertical clearance that's required for the double stack trains. In January 2019, Council resolved not to support that option due to the potential negative impact on the heritage values of that site and requested that the ARTC investigate options to remove the existing bridge and construct a new bridge in a suitable location. A new bridge immediately adjacent to the existing bridge, as currently proposed, was determined to be the preferred solution due to achieving better outcomes in terms of heritage and other considerations. Second question, Council is aware that the ARTC has considered several options at Glenrowan. These options were discussed with the ARTC, but Council have not formally considered each of them, and as Council is not a decision-making authority for this project. The consultation process related to the Inland Rail project is the responsibility of the ARTC, and Council continues to work with the ARTC. The ARTC has been and continues to engage with the community on this work. Third question, Council will not seek that the ARTC abandon the proposal and supports the ARTC's current proposal at Glenrowan. The impact of this proposal from a heritage point of view is the subject of a permit process through Heritage Victoria, and that's an ongoing permit process right now.
Thank you, Director. Another question that I'll aim towards you is read the proposed tower. This is from a Joanne Griffiths. Read the proposed tower development in Glenrowan Heritage Precinct. Council meeting on the 22nd of February informed that the claimed view of the intended derailment site from the proposed tower locations in Lions Park cannot be obtained. Does Council acknowledge that this view was specifically used to justify its application to Heritage Victoria for the location of the tower in the centre of the Lions Park? Does Council acknowledge this was against Heritage Victoria's concerns based on two major heritage studies recommended against any building in the centre of the park? On the 22nd of February, I also... Sorry, Stephen, do you want to answer those two questions first before we go to the next?
Sure, I'll give that a go. When it comes to that application process, the Heritage Impact Statement assessed the impact of the heritage place based on the proposal. The siting of the building will provide improved views, and that was mentioned in the application. So improved means, better than already exists. So just by its sheer nature, the structure will improve the views through the site and also beyond the site because it will elevate people off ground level. So this viewing platform will provide those improved views to various significant locations across the site. The view towards the derailment site will take in the curving rail line. The location of the building supports an understanding of the relationship between the sites, whether they currently exist in the original form or not. Second question, the Heritage Impact Statement does not note that the building should be sited in the centre of the park. It assessed the impact of the heritage place based on the proposal, including the siting of the building, and found that it had a minor impact. All locations for the building and viewing platform that had been noted in previous studies were considered and found that none provided the views that the selected location does while preserving the open character of the Southern Rail Reserve, being set back both from the rail corridor and from Gladstone Street. The location of the project site is at the edge of an important open space area. It has been placed as far south as possible while still enabling access to the view.
Thank you, Director. So on the 22nd of February, I also asked Council whether all the views allegedly obtained from the proposed tower, as claimed in its Heritage Impact Statement, had been surveyed. The reply from Council stating a full site survey has been done did not answer the question. When will Council produce of all the claimed views and claims to have surveyed to justify the public, to satisfy the public, A, that its Heritage Victoria's application for the proposed tower was true and correct and is certified, and B, that its application was properly and legally approved. If it cannot or will not, why should this unbalanced heritage development be permitted to proceed? Director Swart.
Thank you. Council has provided information as part of the permit application process, and detail can be found in the accompanying documentation. This information was made available publicly as part of the permit application process. Council has followed all statutory requirements and provided all required documentation in obtaining the required approvals for the project.
Thank you. I think those questions have been answered very well. Thank you, Director Swart. I'll now throw it to the floor. Are there any questions from the gallery? Fantastic. Council will hang around for a pie and a sausage roll, etc. Thanks to our great hosts there with Veronica and Robin. Thanks for looking after us here. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our council meeting for tonight. Thank you, drive safe, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next meeting. Have a great night. Thank you.